Demeter, keeper of the hearth in Eleusis land, and you servants who tend the goddess's shrines, I pray to be happy along with my son Theseus and the city of Athens and Pythia's country, where my father raised me in a wealthy home and gave me his daughter Aethra in marriage to Aegeus. This is my prayer as I look at these old faces of women who have left their homes in Argos and fall here at my knees with suppliant branches. They've suffered a terrible blow. Around Cadmus city gates, their 7 noble sons have died. They are childless now. Adrastus, the Argive king, led them in a vain attempt to reclaim a share of Oedipus's royal inheritance for his son-in-law Polynices. They lie dead there, fallen in their battle. Their mothers want to lay their limbs to rest, but the victors forbid it, and defying God's law will not even let the bodies be lifted off the ground. Adrastus, too, has need of me, a burden he shares with them. He lies here weeping, his eyes out. He begs me to persuade my son with prayers, to agree to gather up their bodies for burial, either through diplomacy or by force of arms. This is all he asks of my son. I came from my home here to this sacred place to sacrifice for the land's yield. It was here that the bountiful stalk of grain first appeared, its ear bristling up from the ground below. Bound by their boughs, no bond at all, I wait here beside the holy altars of the 2 goddesses, Demeter and her daughter, feeling pity for these gray-haired mothers who have lost their sons. Out of respect for their sacred wreaths, a herald has gone to town to summon my son Theseus here so that he will release the land from their sorrow or relieve their suppliant needs, doing what is right and holy towards the gods. Women who are wise do everything through their men. That is our custom.
Hello, welcome to Reading Greek Tragedy Online. I'm Joel Christensen from Brandeis University, and I'm here with the Center for Hellenic Studies and Out of Chaos Theater, and another great cast and crew for this week, including Sara Valentine, who you just saw, Evelyn Miller, David Rubin, Hannah Barrie, and Paul Mahoney, Carlos Bellato, and Noree Victoria. Our special guest this week is Angeliki Tzanetou. And she's here to help us understand more about Euripides' play, The Suppliants. So this week in this play keeps us around the city of Thebes, contemplating unburied dead, but with a typical Euripidean twist. Instead of just the body of Polynices being at issue, Euripides' play centers around the chorus of mothers of all the seven against Thebes, who supplicated Theseus in Athens to force Thebes to return to their bodies and allow them to be buried. Beyond the basic expansion of the funerary rites theme to the entire expedition, this play also introduces fascinating questions of Athenian power and empire, and the ability of any one Greek state to force another to maintain some basic level of civilization. Now, the play was allegedly performed in 423 BCE and reflects some earlier historical changes in ritual, but it is also a play that invites us to wonder about how it reflects the concerns of the Athenian people during the Peloponnesian War. And it also engages with some of the issues we face in our day, about what it means to honor the dead and what it means to learn from them and look forward to the future. So I'm really glad to have Angeliki here today to help us talk about it, because it's a play that really sort of challenges the tradition. Angeliki, if you will unmute and join me, perhaps you could tell me, as someone who's only read this play a few times, what are some things that the audience should know about it and look for in its performance?
Yes, so first of all, good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed tremendously watching the series. I will start by saying that the myth of the seven was known to the ancient audience from the epic cycle already. But what was missing, so the epic Thebaid told the story of the death of the Argives in Thebes, but what was missing was the refusal of the Thebans to give up the fallen. All right. So this issue of the denial of funeral rites is something that we encounter much later on. And first, in terms of tragedy, we encounter it in Aeschylus's lost play called Eleusinioi, the men of Ulysses. And that, even though it's lost, it's dated in the 460s. And what we do know, however, from Plutarch's Life of Theseus, is that the main difference between Aeschylus's version and Euripides' version was that Aeschylus had Theseus achieve the recovery of the dead and the burial through a diplomatic mission, which is something that Theseus attempts, and it is spoken of already in the prologue. We just heard Aethra talk about it as though she's summarizing not only the myth, which was familiar to the audience, as you were saying, but also its precursor or its antecedent versions. And in this iteration, Theseus too wants to remain a champion of peace and diplomacy if he can, and he brings up the possibility of diplomacy in his debate with the Herald, but that is a big alteration.
So to stick to that for just a minute, because that's something that I don't think I was aware of. This whole the motif of the unburied dead and suing for the right to bury it. I mean, it goes back to the end of the Iliad, right? It's one of those crucial. That's a crucial moment. So an Athenian audience at this period, do you think they would be more keyed into the failure of diplomacy in this play, or would they really be thinking about the importance of burying the dead too?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. And of course, the same, so it is clear that it is important to the 5th century Athenians, and it's important to tragedy. We do not know when the funeral oration, Epitaphios Logos, was first established, maybe in the 460s also. So it is possible, and we know that we see in Euripides' Suppliant Women that the funeral oration was also praising the dead and taking care of the dead was a huge, the proper recovery of the dead was a huge part of it. So I think it's the religious mindset is there, running from the Iliad, as you said, down to the Peloponnesian War. But I think here it's far more politicized. And I think that one more thing, that one thing that has influenced Euripides' version, at least, is Antigone, where we have, so another way of looking at it, here are unburied dead, Polynices in Antigone, who is criminalized, right? He's a traitor. So that's why he's refused burial. Here we have the 7 who are part of an unjust expedition of sorts, whom now Aeschylus' 7, whom you had last week, he presents the 7 in a very negative light. So the issue becomes complicated. And I like this, that it becomes complicated, because in Euripides' play, Theseus brings up the question of that these men were rash and they undertook the wrong war. But then, he comes to see, and he really espouses the view that the dead should be honored. And this idea of the criminalization of the dead is something I think that resonates a lot with us today as well. This is another great adaptation right now, an important one, Antigone and Ferguson, for example. So I don't know if that helps.
Oh, no, it absolutely helps. And I think thinking, for people who were with us last week for the 7, that's 40 years almost prior to this play, right? So a generation and a half almost, and taking the side of the dead and taking the side of those who lost is really interesting in the context of what it means to be an Athenian and what it means to be, near in an armistice in the Peloponnesian War. So I think for now we'll leave the audience with that and move on to the first scene after what we second scene after what we first just witnessed with Aethra. The chorus comes on and begins a conversation with Aethra and urges her to speak on their behalf. The chorus is made up of all those mothers of the war dead from the Seven Against Thebes, and they go together to speak to Theseus for our second scene of the day.
What is all this mourning and beating of breaths? These threnodies for the dead I hear, this solemn din issuing from the temple. Anxiety sets me on edge. I have come for my mother. Has something happened to her? She's been away from home for such a long time. Oh, what's this? A strange sight hits my eyes. My elderly mother sitting at the altar, surrounded by old women who are strangers to me, beating out not just a single strain of grief from their aged eyes. Piteous tears stream to the ground.
My son, these women are the mothers of sons who met their death attacking the gates of Cadmus. Those 7 commanders with suppliant bows, as you see, they hold me here, encircled, dear son.
And who is that man raising a din at the temple doors?
They say his name is Adrastus, king of the Argives.
And these children around him, are they theirs?
No, they are the sons of the men killed in battle.
So why do they come to us, reaching out to suppliants?
I know their story, but it should come from them.
You there, wrapped in your shawl, answer my questions. Uncover your head, cease your mournful noise, and speak.
King of the Athenians' land, Theseus, glorious in victory, I am here as a suppliant to you and the city. You know the disastrous expedition that I led.
Yes, I do. You did not pass through Greece in secrecy.
That's how I lost the best and the brightest men in Argos.
That kind of disaster is often the result of brutal war.
I went to ask the city for the men who had died there.
Relying on Hermes' sacred heralds to bury the bodies.
Yes. But those responsible for their death won't allow it.
What was their reason, when what you asked was right?
Think. Their success did not make them wise.
Have you come to me for advice, or what do you want?
Theseus, I want you to bring back the Argive men.
Where is your Argos now? Are her boasts for nothing?
Defeated. We are utterly defeated. We have come to you.
Why did you lead the 7 companies against Thebes?
I was doing a favor for my sons-in-law.
Which of the Argive men wooed your daughters?
I did not make an alliance with any native Argives.
Are you saying you gave Argive girls to outsiders?
Yes. One to Tydeus and one to Polynices, a native of Thebes.
What made you want to bring these men into your family?
Phoebus' confusing riddle caught me off guard.
What did Apollo say about making matches for your girls?
That I should give my 2 daughters to a boar and a lion.
So how did you unwind the gods' inspired utterances?
One night, 2 refugees came to my palace gates, Tydeus and Polynices. They got into a fight with each other.
You gave your daughters to them as if they were wild beasts.
Yeah. I thought they fought like 2 savage animals.
How did it come about that they had left their homelands?
Tydeus was in exile for spilling the blood of a kinsman.
And And Oedipus's son? What caused him to leave Thebes?
His father's curses. He was afraid he might kill his brother.
It was a good idea for him to accept that voluntary exile.
But those who stayed mistreated those who went away.
Was his brother trying to deprive him of his birthright?
To avenge that wrong I set out. That's how I was ruined.
Didn't you consult with seers? Look at the sacrificial flame.
Alas, you indict me where I made my biggest mistake.
You did not, as it seems to me, set out with the gods' favour.
Even worse, I set out despite the advice of Amphiaraus.
Did you find it so easy to brush aside the gods' will?
My mind was muddled by young men's clamour.
You acted with a stout heart rather than a sound mind.
Something that has brought many commanders to ruin. You are the most valiant throughout all Greece, King of Athens. I feel ashamed to kneel on the ground as a suppliant and grasp your knees in my hands, a grey-haired man, a king once favoured by heaven. Yet I must yield to my reduced circumstances. Bring the bodies back to me, I beg you. Take pity on my mistakes. Pity these mothers of dead sons. Grey-haired, old age has come on them, bringing childlessness in its wake. They have dared to come here and set foot on foreign soil, their limbs cramped by old age, not on a mission to Demeter's mysteries, but to bury their dead sons. They are the ones at an age ripe to receive this service from them. Then perhaps you'll say, how is it that you ignore Pelops' land and come to lay this burden on Athens? This explanation I have to offer by way of justification. Sparta is harsh and is known for a deceitful character. The other states are small and impotent, but your city is the only one that has strength to withstand this labor, for it is attentive to others' suffering and can claim you as its young shepherds. Something many cities lack and are lost because they are in want of such a leader.
I, too, add my voice to his, Theseus. Take pity on our tragedy.
I've struggled over this question in debates with others. I've heard it suggested that the bad things in our lives are more numerous than the good. Well, I have the opposite opinion to this. I say that mortals have more that's good than bad. If not, we wouldn't be able to get on with life. I have nothing but praise for that God who set our lives in order out of chaos and brutality, first instilling reason, and then bestowing speech, the give and take of words, so that we understand each other. Then the growing of the crops, with the life-giving drops of rain falling from the sky, so that Earth's bounty gives food and drink for our bellies. After that, defense against winter weather, protection from the sun's heat, and sailing across the sea, so that we can carry on trade with each other for whatever we lack at home. And if something is obscure and we don't see it, by looking into the fire or down at the folds of entrails or from watching birds' flight, seers make it known to us. Isn't it arrogant on our part, when God has provided so well for our needs of life, to find it insufficient? Our self-importance strives to get us power greater than God's, and obsessed with pride in our intelligence, we deem ourselves to be more clever than the gods. You, it's clear, belong to this company. Foolishly, you gave your daughters in marriage to outsiders, following oracles, as if you believed in God's power, And by mixing your splendid family with society's dregs, you tainted your house. A man of sense should not bring good people into contact with persons of low character, but ally his house with those blessed by God. Next, you led the Argive forces on a military expedition. You had seers' prophecies, but disregarded them. You defied the gods and destroyed your city, led on by young men who are greedy for glory and build up war fever with no regard for right or wrong. Citizens fall into three categories. The super rich are unproductive. All they care about is getting more. The have-nots, those in need of a livelihood, give us reason to fear them because they live in envy. They make the rich targets of their slings and slanders, brainwashed by the mouthings of vicious leaders. Of the three, the middle class is our salvation, defending good government established in the city. And then you want me to become your ally in war. I bid you goodbye. If your plans have failed, it is your lot to feel the crunch. Count us out.
Theseus, son of Aethra, daughter of Pythias, who was the son of Pelops, and we who come from Pelops' land have the same blood in our veins as you. What will you do? Betray your heritage and drive out grey-headed women and not treat them as you should? Do not do this.
A wild beast has its rocky refuge. A slave has the gods' altar to turn to. A storm-tossed city cowers to another city. For in all of mortals' affairs, nothing has the gods' blessing all the way to the end.
Take pity on me for my children. A wandering suppliant letting out a mournful, mournful, keening cry of woe.
Look upon the tears in my eyes as I fall down at your knees to beg of you a burial for my son.
Mother, why are you crying and covering your head with your fine cloak? Is it from hearing their sorrowful laments? Do not sit in tears at the sacred hearth of the goddess Deo. Their grief is no reason for you to cry.
Poor, poor women.
You are not one of them.
My son, may I say something that is a credit to you in the city?
Yes, a lot of wisdom comes from women's words.
Still I hesitate to give the advice I'm holding inside.
Shame on you, to hide useful advice from friends.
I will not then be silent now and later blame my silence because I kept silent to our harm. Not in fear that it is useless for a woman to give good advice will I dismiss mine out of timidity. First, my son, I ask you to consider the gods' part in this, so you don't slip up out of disrespect. In all other ways, you show wisdom, but not in this. Besides that, if we did not need to show courage on behalf of the wronged, then I would hold my tongue. As it is, be aware of how much honor this brings you, and it causes me no fear in advising it, my son. The violent men who are preventing the dead bodies from obtaining the burial and funeral rites do them. With your own hand, you should force them to do this. Stop them from tainting the laws all Greeks share. Then someone will say that you had a chance to win a crown of glory for Athens, but you stood back in fear because you are a coward. Yet you took part in the struggle with the wild boar, a useless sport. But when you ought to take up this struggle in sight of helmet and spear point, you proved a coward. You are my son, Theseus. Do not do this. Do you see how your country, ridiculed as lacking in policy, turns a glaring eye at the scoffers? The city's reputation will grow through its efforts, but those isolationist cities acting in obscurity because of their caution also look darkly on others. Will you not go, my son, and bring aid to the dead and to these unhappy women in their hour of need.
Mother, the words I have just spoken are right, as far as he is concerned, and I have made clear my opinion on the decisions that have tripped him up. But I also understand what you advise me to do, how it is not consistent with my inclinations to avoid danger. By performing many glorious feats, I have displayed this character among the Greeks, always to stand out as a scourge of wrongdoing. What will those with ill feelings towards me say when my own mother, who fears me for more than anyone else, is the first to urge this undertaking? I will do it. I will go and gain release for the bodies using diplomacy. But if that fails, it will be done by force of arms. And I will have the gods on my side. Still, I need the whole city to approve of this, and if I am for it, they will approve. Yet by sharing the deliberation, I will have the city better disposed. When I liberated Athens, I established the people as sovereign, with equal suffrage for all citizens. I will take Adrastus as proof of my arguments and go into the assembly of the people and convince them. I will come back with a force of elite Athenian youth and waiting under arms. I will send Creon a message, requesting him to give up the bodies of the fallen.
So at that moment, Theseus exits with Aethra and Adrastus in tow, and the chorus sing their anxiety about the outcome of the Athenian expedition. At this point, a herald comes in, and they start to sing, or the chorus sings of the troubles that they'll face, that they have faced, and the sort of sorrows at losing all of their loved ones. The herald instructs them to formally request Creon's burial of the war dead once they get there, so the diplomatic start, with the threat of arms as a backup. However, then a Theban herald comes, and it limits the need to send a messenger at all. So in the next scene that we'll look at, we get a discussion, so the reflection of what's going on in the diplomatic scenes. So we'll go to that next scene now.
Who's the master here? To whom am I to deliver the message from Creon, who governs Cadmus land?
First, my friend, you used the wrong word to begin your speech in looking for a master here. A city that is free is not governed by one man acting alone, but citizens are sovereign, taking turns by yearly succession, and it does not give the lion's share to the wealthy, but the poor man has an equal part.
In our game of dice, this is 1 point you cede to our advantage. The city I come from is governed by one man, and is not in the hands of the mob. There is no one to puff the citizens up with his words, turning them this way and that for his own advantage. One instant he's well liked and gains popularity, the next he causes ruin. Then coming up with new lies, he hides his earlier failures and gets off unpunished. Anyway, how could the people, who aren't capable of reasoning straight, guide a city on a straight course? A better understanding is reached through time than in haste. A poor man who toils on the land, even if he has some education, could not look out for the common good because he has work to do. For serious people, this is an unhealthy situation. If a worthless man rises in value by controlling the people with rhetoric when he comes from the dirt.
Our herald is a braggart, and as it seems, an amateur orator. Well, since you are the one to have initiated the debate, listen to me. You have set the terms of discussion. There's nothing more corrosive to society than tyranny, where, first of all, there are no laws established for the common good, but one man holds all the power, becoming a law unto himself. There is no equality. Where the laws are written, The powerless poor and the rich have equal justice before the law. If he is slandered, the less fortunate man can use the same words as the one in better circumstances. The weaker can defeat the stronger if his cause is just. And truly, when the citizens are a country's masters, they are happy to count many young people in their ranks. A man who is king, however, finds this dangerous. And the best of the citizens, any who he thinks are clever, he puts to death out of suspicion and fear for his power. How can a city remain strong and secure when the ruler eradicates enterprise and cuts down the young like stalks of grain in a spring meadow? Why should we gain wealth and a livelihood for our children only to toil for a despot's gain? Why bring up our daughters chastely at home to be playthings for tyrants when they so desire and to get them ready for tragedy? May I end my life if my children are to be subject to a tyrant's lust. Tell me, what need has brought you here to our land? Next time, I hope Creon will send a messenger to our city who is a man of fewer words than you.
With the backing of all the people of Thebes, I forbid you to allow Adrastus to set foot in this country. If he's already in the land, before the sun goes down, break up his sacred ritual vows of supplication and drive him out. Do not try to take up the bodies by force, since the city of Argos is no concern of yours. Consider carefully, and do not, out of irritation at my words, because you believe your city is free, puff up with pride and make your answer from weakness. Hope is faithless. It sets many cities to join in battle with each other, leading their spirit to deeds of excess. Whenever war comes up for a vote of the people, no one any longer figures his own death is imminent. Instead, he lays this misfortune off on somebody else. If death were before their eyes when the vote is cast, war-crazy Greece would not now be destroying itself. And yet, of the 2 points of argument, we all know which is better. Both the good and the bad of each. How much better peace is than war for humankind. Peace, far and away the muse's favourite, and enemy to retribution. But brushing all this aside in our delusion, we choose war, and we enslave the weaker. Man against man, city against city. You want to help our enemies, our dead enemies, by taking up for burial men who were destroyed by their own violence? Isn't it right that Capaneus' body is still smoking from the thunderbolt when he raised up ladders to scale our gates and swore that he would sack our city whether God was willing or not? And that bird-watching seer, wasn't he swallowed up when his chariot and team went down into earth's maw? Men with good sense ought to love their children first, then their parents and country, which they should increase and not shipwreck. A rash commander is as dangerous as a young sailor. A calm one is skilled when needed. And this, discretion in a crisis, is the better part of valor.
In my response, I will take up your first points first. I did not realize that Creon was my master, and his power was so much greater that he could compel Athens to do as he commands. Watch the world spin backward if we are to be pushed around like that. I'm not trying to do damage to your city or causing the kind of struggle that comes at the cost of human life, but the bodies of the dead, I have the right to bury them, preserving the law of all Greeks. What is wrong with that? Whatever you suffered at the hands of the Argives, they are dead now. You defended yourself against your foes nobly, but disgracefully for them. Your claims have been met. It's time to allow their bodies to be laid to rest in the ground. Let each of their parts return to that element from where it came into the light, the spirit into the air, the body into the earth. For we do not own our body except to live our life in it. And then, when we depart this life, Earth, who supported it, takes it back again. Have you come here to give me an ultimatum, and yet you are afraid of the dead if they will be laid to rest? What are you afraid will happen? That if they are buried, they will dig up your land? Or that in the depths of the earth they will father children from whom vengeance will come? This is a foolish waste of words, yours and mine, the voice fear of imagined chimeras in your mind. Listen, you fools. Learn the tragedy of human existence. Our lives are a struggle till the end. Some prosper soon, some later. For others, their luck has come and gone. What should be done then? Allow us. We just want to do the right thing. To bury the bodies of the fallen, or accept this truth. I shall go and bury them by force.
May I answer in brief what you've just said?
Say whatever you wish. You aren't one to hold back.
You will never take the sons of Argos from our land.
Hear now what I have to say in answer to you.
I'll hit you out, only because it's your turn.
I shall go to Aesopian land and bury the bodies.
Did your father bring you up to take on all comers?
Yes, all the insolent. We do not side against the good.
Ah, bring it on. Our spear will catch you at your work.
What raging army could come from a serpent's teeth?
You will know when you suffer it. You're still young.
From all your boasts, you do not move my heart to seethe with rage. But depart now from my land and take with you the empty words that you brought. We have reached an impasse.
So, Angeliki, if you'll join me now, we have a little time to talk about this. There's so much in what we've seen that we can talk about, but I want to start by talking sort of the end and the content there, because this debate between the Herald advocating the strength of tyranny and Theseus representing democracy has no small purchase on our modern day, right? And for me, I mean, one of the most powerful things he says there is that passage where the Herald says, the wise person takes care of his children first and his parents and the stability of the state. And that just leaves me thinking about the hard choices we all make in between sort of our personal lives and balancing the greater good. How would have this debate resonated for Athenian audiences at the time?
So I think, as we come to see pretty quickly in the debate as well, it is not that Athenians would have disagreed that those were good priorities, but the way that it is phrased is that we sort of look after our family and our fatherland. It sounds patriotic in a very in an ultra conservative sort of way, so what the Athenians, of course, were known for was that they were polypragmonists. They had their hands in many things, which unfortunately we can't always translate very positively in English, but we'll come to say it as it is. The question is, in terms of war, if you intervene in a war that is just, are you doing it for yourself, or are you doing it for the public good, which is, I think, part of the discussion here as well. So,
I mean, when we get into discussions like this, so to talk about the ancient Athens as being humanitarian seems extremely anachronistic. Not that I don't believe it, but to what extent do you think that they believed in sort of concepts of good that transcended the advantage of the state, right? So we might get Thucydidean in such a discussion, but Was it important for the Athenians watching these plays to think that they had claim to a greater right than just what was good for Athens?
This is a complicated question, but I think now that we've heard some of the play, we can also go back to your important question about the rites of burial of the dead and sort of. So first of all, let's start with that. So the Athenians are showing themselves to be truly pious in this way. Not just being responsible for the public good. We know there was no separation of church and state, but here they truly overlap. In the ancient Near East, the pious person was not the one who gave countless sacrifices to the gods, because then piety would only have been the prerogative of the rich, but really the person who opened their home and opened their city to those who were afflicted, to those who were refugees. And Athens soon picks up this reputation in tragedy, at least for being the city that is most open to those that are in need, that she is prone to pity, right? And here that alongside with her piety, which is shown in Theseus's ultimate resolve to defend the suppliants. So alongside with that comes the fact that Athens doesn't go out of her way to intervene in other people's affairs. It is others, like Adrastus, the king of Argos, of a major city for the Athenians. So Argos, which is next door to Mycenae, and Mycenae and Argos mythically are the homes of King Agamemnon and King Menelaus sometimes as well, that everybody knows. So Adrastus was a mythical king of Argos, and it so happened that his two son-in-laws happened to be fugitives. They happened to be exiles, and one of them was Polynices from Thebes. So, the fact that he finds himself in this difficult position, and he comes to Athens and says to Theseus, only you can offer this. All the other cities, well, they're small, and the Spartans are fickle. How nice to hear that during the Peloponnesian War, yeah? And so he's playing out power. On the other hand, you have Theseus, who it's interesting. He's kind of young, okay? And it comes from when he's called that in the play. His mom says, she really nails him there. So you were okay with tackling the boar, but this kind of ponos you're not going to be able to take up. So I mentioned the Greek word ponos, which means trial, but it also means suffering. And Athens's wars, the ones that she fought on behalf of others, on behalf of suppliants in particular, namely the 7 against Thebes, and also the help that she lent to the children of Heracles when they were persecuted by Eurystheus's nemesis, his Eurystheus. So they come to Athens for help. All of these are the ponoi, the real military efforts that Athens put out on behalf of others. And this is how she acquired this reputation for being an open city, a city that embraced suppliants, and a city that was pious.
And so what I love about your highlighting of that speech from Aethra is that when she says, oh, you killed a boar, but you won't do this, she encapsulates like the development of the heroic narrative in like 2 lines, right? You can't be a Heracles. You have to be the real Theseus who fights for civilization, right? And something that matters. And what I like about the idea of the suppliants and bringing in the exiles is, the echoes that the Homeric line from the Odyssey, which is that all beggars and exiles are from Zeus and our gift to them is small but precious. But I do wonder how that squares with Theseus's sort of muscular criticism of Adrastus for welcoming in Tydeus and Polynices, and the fact that, he says some really not nice things about foreigners, and when his mother is in fact a foreigner.
Brilliant.
So,
Yes.
So how do we make sense of this sort of triangulation of the other and the self and the good exile and the bad one here?
Correct. So Barbara Goff has written a great article called Aethra at Eleusis. So I have to mention it because it is due to her that she points out this idea of Aethra as a foreigner. So first of all, Theseus, in his first speech, where he's an unsure leader, it seems like himself, he hasn't really taken up the baton of leadership. So he kind of advocates both the middle ground, so to speak, but also isolationism. And so it's very interesting. It's a view that is not reflected in the Athens of the there and now, so in the 420s. So that's interesting. The second thing that he does is that I think he gives a case, he's trying to, Euripides may be trying also to reconcile the two versions of kind of the unjust war, as we talked about before, the negative image of the seven, with the more positive one that Adrastus is definitely going to present in the funeral oration. And somewhere in between there, Theseus is really offering a renunciation of, he's being exclusionary towards foreigners. And we know that Pericles' law of 451, 450 did quite that. So it sounds as though he has kind of a democratic mindset, as though you're separating democracy from Athens' other identity, either aspect, the fact that she ruled over so many other Greeks. And what's interesting, and I'll stop in a second, is that to see that speech is turned around completely by Aethra, who first of all is a woman who comes out and speaks publicly and marks her speech as that moment as very political, as very public, but she becomes a mouthpiece for Athenian hegemonic or / imperial ideology. So she puts out the arguments that allow Theseus to claim that Athens, in fact, is a powerful city, but is a moral city and uses that power morally, and of course, to expand its own glory by taking on again, same idea, military wars, ponoi.
So I think you bring out well there in sort of Theseus's changes and the different rhetoric, the cognitive dissonance that is necessary to be an empire that also claims to be a democracy. Not that we would know anything about that.
No.
So we're going to move to the next few scenes. One thing more, Angeliki, before we go. What would you tell an audience to look for in the rest of the play? What are a couple themes or scenes?
So one thing I want to mention that we didn't have time to say preliminarily is that the other big change that Euripides makes, or two big changes, is that he switches from a male chorus to women. So the great emphasis on the presence of women, both as the chorus and on Aethra. And secondly, to watch for how to watch for the funeral orations that Adrastus gives, because that was just an Athenian thing. So that's pretty interesting, allowing the others, like we see the Persians, to tell their side of the story, to praise their own. And this is contested, of course. And then in the latter part of the play, I mean, I would read the first part of the play in two ways. First, under what conditions are suppliants accepted, and that it's not automatic, and that Athens, it's not automatic. And the second part of the play then deals really with the grief, because it's also a play that, yes, is positive in the sense that Athens does the right thing. But by the same token, Aethra comes in crying. She's surrounded by crying women who have surrounded her. And all the way to the end, it's grief unending.
Yeah,
the private grief.
Thank you. And we'll come back at the end for more from you, Angeliki. So after the scene we just saw, before our discussion, Theseus leaves to go in person to Thebes and make demands of them to bury the bodies. And the chorus then continue to sing about their anxiety, their fear, their anticipation of what will come. A messenger enters with news of Theseus's victory. Creon was unwilling to start with, the reports, and Theseus responded with military action. The messenger unfurls a full account of the conflict, the slaughter, and above all, Theseus's prowess as a commander and a fighter. The king of Athens does not, however, sack Thebes. He stops short. He simply returns with the bodies of the seven. Adrastus exits to greet the incoming entourage, and he bears the dead as he returns.
Some good news, some sad. Glorious victory for this city and honour for the men at arms are shared by both city and soldiers.
And for me, to see the limbs of my child stings my heart, and yet is a longed-for sight, if I will see it, looking upon a day I never wished for, the greatest grief of all.
I wish ancient Father Time had left me forever unwed up to this day. Why did I have to have children? I expect I would have suffered so terribly if I had been uncoupled from marriage.
And now I see the most naked evil of all, the loss of my dear, dear sons.
Oh. Now I see the bodies brought here of my lost sons. Oh, sorrow.
I wish I could die with my children, going down in a common death.
Mothers, sound the lament for the dead going into the ground, keening in response, hearing my lamentation.
My children, how bitter this farewell from loving mothers. I speak to you, dead and gone.
O city of Argos, do you not look upon my fate?
Theseus, the sorrowful childless mothers of dead children.
Bring forward the bloody bodies of the ill-fated dead.
Let me hold my children close in my embrace.
Here they are for you.
A heavy burden of grief.
I wish the ranks of the Cadmeans had laid me low in the dust.
I wish I had never been coupled to a man in wedlock.
Look on the ocean of sorrows, unhappy mothers of children.
Bitter the marriages you have seen.
Bitter the oracle of Phoebus.
The fury full of grief has left the house of Oedipus deserted and has now come to haunt you.
I had it in mind to question you as you poured out your grief before the army, but held off. Since I let the tale pass there, now I look to Adrastus for answers. How did it happen that these men were so outstanding in courage? Since you knew them better, speak to the young citizens here. You have the knowledge. For I saw their acts of courage by which they expected to capture the city were greater than words can tell. One thing I will not ask you, so you will not laugh at me, which opponent each of them faced in battle, or whose was the spear that brought him down. These are worthless words, both for listeners and the speaker. When a man is in the heat of battle, when spears are flying thick and fast before his eyes, how could he report which of the warriors was brave?
Hear me now. I welcome the opportunity you offer me to give the dead their due and say what is true and genuine in eulogy of my friends. You see the man struck by the fiery lightning bolt. This is Capaneus. He had no more self-importance than a man of slight means, avoiding anyone at the sumptuous table who was overbearing or disrespected moderation. Good, he said, lay not in gluttony, but moderation was enough. To his friends, he was a true friend, whether they were by his side or far away. Not many people are like that. He didn't know how to tell a lie, though in conversation he was good-natured. He made good his obligations to his household and fellow citizens. My second subject is Eteocles, who was practiced in another kind of virtue. He was a young man of very limited means, but he had held many honors in the land of Argos. Though his friends often tried to enhance his wealth, he did not accept it into his home to avoid becoming its slave by taking on the burden of riches. The third is Hippomaden. His character was like this. From childhood, he had no heart for indulging in the pleasures of the muses and the easy life. But living in the country, he was eager to strengthen his physique to manly hardness, going to the hunt, exercising his horses, stretching his bow in his hands, because he wanted to make his body useful to the state. Next is Parthenopaeus, the son of the huntress Atalanta, the handsomest man of his generation. He was an Arcadian, but he came to Inachus streams and was brought up in Argos. When he came of age, first, as becomes outsiders who are guests in a country, he was not prickly or offensive to the citizens, nor was he given to divisive speech, which makes a citizen or an alien especially annoying. My great esteem for Tydeus I shall put into few words. He was not flashy in speech, but a skilled craftsman in the practice of war, lethal to men of lesser skill. From these words, then, do not be surprised, Theseus, that these men dared to die before the towers.
So after that speech, the eulogy, which really recalls the beginning of the whole saga that we see in the Seven Against Thebes, Theseus and Adrastus debate where to bury Capaneus, the member of the Seven directly struck down by Zeus. Burying him could, of course, bring pollution on the rest of them. It's decided that Capaneus will be buried separately, and Theseus invites the chorus to draw nearer and touch their departed loved ones before they are buried.
A happy mother, no more. No more a mother at all. I have no share in the happiness of Argive mothers, mothers of sons. Artemis, helper of birthing, has no words for the childless. Life is not worth living. Like a cloud I flutter, tossed by wintry winds.
7 unhappy mothers, we gave birth to 7 sons, noblest among the Argives.
Tears are left to me. In my home lie sad memories of my son. Haircut in mourning, crowns for festivals, and songs, though not the kind golden-haired Apollo is glad to hear.
Here I see the covered chamber of Capaneus and his sacred tomb outside the temple. Theseus' offerings to the dead. And look, up there near the man killed by the lightning bolt, his noble wife, Evadne, daughter of Iphis, the king.
Why is she standing on the towering rock that looms over the temple, moving along the path?
What light, what brilliance the sun conveyed, and moon bright in the sky, where swift stars shoot through the dark, when at my wedding the town of Argos towered up in songs and blessings, and praised the bridegroom Capaneus, armed in bronze. To you I have come rushing like a bacchant from my home, seeking the pyre's flame in the same tomb, and death to my painful end, and the sadness of living. Sweetness is this death, to die with my dead lover, if destiny will allow it. I see my journey end where I stand. Fortune joins her footsteps with mine. For glory's sake, I hurried here to leap from this cliff onto the pyre, to meld my body into the bright flame with my husband's, my loving flesh lying with his flesh. I will go down to Persephone's chamber beneath the earth Never by prolonging my life will I betray your death.
Unhappy women, I have come, a sad old man nursing in my heart a double grief for my children, to convey my dead son home, Eteocles, slain by the Theban spear into the land of his fathers. I'm hoping to find my daughter who is gone, in a frenzy from her home, the wife of Capaneus. He is struck by a longing to lie dead with her husband. Earlier we kept her closely watched in the house, but when I let down my guard in the present troubles and left her unattended, she bolted. I think it very likely she is here. Tell me if you have seen her.
Why question them? Here I am on this cliff like a bird hovering above Capaneus' pyre, father. In my despair, I feel weightless in this height.
My child, what ill breeze, what wanderlust, oh, why did you steal away from your home and come here?
Oh, you would become angry with me if you heard my reasons. I don't want to tell you, father.
What's this? Doesn't your father have a right to know?
No, you would not be a wise judge of my thinking.
Why have you dressed yourself in this costume?
Oh, my dress means to bring me my share of glory, father.
You do not look as if you are in mourning from your husband.
I am dressed for something wonderful and new.
And yet you are appearing beside his pyre and tomb.
I have come here for my own glorious victory.
What victory will you win? You must tell me this.
I will surpass all women under the eye of the sun.
In the craft of Athena or in the mind's good sense?
In my heart's courage. I will lie in death with my husband. I will leap onto my dead Capaneus' pyre.
No, I will never allow you to do this drastic deed.
It does not matter. You will never catch me in your arms. And now, I will let my body plummet not to your liking, but to mine and my husband's, who will burn with me.
Evadne burns and Iphis mourns, both for his daughter, for his own old age, for the situation. And the chorus engages in a second round of mourning as the children of the dead enter and grieve with their grandmothers.
Adrastus, and you women, natives of Argos, you see these children bearing in their arms the bodies of their heroic fathers that I recovered. I bestow them as a gift upon you, I and the city. You must be ever mindful of this and keep gratitude in your hearts, seeing how I acted for you, and repeat these same words to your children, to honor this city, and to their children's children.
Theseus, we are aware of all the good you have done to benefit the land of Argos in our need, and we will have eternal gratitude toward you.
Hear, Theseus, these words spoken by Athena, which you must heed, and if you do, you will prosper. Do not give the bones to these children to carry into the land of Argos, letting them go so easily. But in return for your hardships and those of the city, first take an oath. This oath Adrastus must swear. He holds sway, and as master of all the territory of the Danaans, it is up to him to take the oath. This is to be the oath. Never will the Argives bring hostile troops in armor into this land. If others attack, they will deploy their army to oppose them. If, abandoning their oath, they come against our city, the land of the Argives will perish utterly in return. In what vessel you must slay the victims, I will tell you. There is within the halls a tripod with bronze feet, which Heracles commanded you to set up at the Pythian hearth. On this first cut the throats of 3 sheep, and then inscribe the oath in the hollow belly of the tripod, and give it to the god who oversees Delphi as a memorial to this oath. The sharp-bladed knife with which you carry out the sacrifices and draw their blood, bury it in the depths of the earth beside the pyres where the 7 bodies are burnt. Once this is done, the urns may be carried out of our land.
Queen Athena, I will obey your words. You keep me in the right, so I do not miss the mark. I will bind him with oaths. Only guide me right, for if you are propitious to our city, our future is assured for all of time to come.
Angeliki, as you anticipated, that the play takes some pretty radical tonal shifts. Before we start talking to the actors about some of it, let's start by talking about that. What do you make of how we move from the sort of political debates in the beginning of the play to the prolonged mourning to Athena's, serious intervention at the end? How do you fit these parts together?
Just also, I think, honestly, I read the play a lot, and it's a very difficult play, and it's a very long play. And so just one thread, I think, and then I'll focus exactly on what you asked. So this is a suppliant play, right? And the Athenians knew of other suppliant plays, but to the modern audiences before our time, a few generations ago, these were not interesting, but in fact they are. They keep your attention. You don't know what's going to happen. And so the first part of the play is really about whether Athens is going to accept the suppliants or not. Theseus gets that squared away with Adrastus before he receives the threat from Thebes through the Herald, who is the messenger of Creon, so that then Athens can kind of flex her power and show that the power stands in the side of the right. But what's important, I think, here and for this moment in the Peloponnesian War and in the history of the Athenian Empire is that Athens is presenting herself not just as a pious city, as I said, but particularly as a defender of pan-Hellenic customs. So this is the idea that somebody has to do it. And in a completely different way to relate it to something that people are more familiar, everybody's more familiar with, it's with Antigone. Like Creon talks about man-made law, and Antigone talks about the laws of the gods. There's kind of a similar dimension here, only that Athens is appropriating for herself the power to defend what is morally good and what is pious for everyone. And that's a way to justify her power. So Theseus goes, they win by force, and then he takes on, he's taken on his mother's lessons to heart. He even washes the bodies because the collective Argive army is buried somewhere near Mount Kithyron, so near Thebes, and it is only the 5 pyres that are, the 5 bodies that are carried back, all right? Now, Adrastus was part of the 7. I didn't make that clear at the beginning, so here's sort of -1, he survives. But Kapaneus, of course, has been struck down by Zeus for scaling the wars of Thebes and for everything else. That's why we're down to 5 bodies. And these 5 bodies, the mothers are there. They've been the ones clamoring to get them back. They're like the Argentinian mothers of the missing. Mothers go out. These are mothers at war, and they're claimed. But it's this strange way in which they ask for Theseus' help, but Theseus kind of gets in the way a little bit. So they can't immediately run to the bodies and wash them and take care of them before the official public business of the funeral oration begins. So that's an interesting point. But we talked a little bit about the funeral oration. What I want to say then, the public part is kind of bracketed. And the Athenian part will return at the end. And then there is this second part or third part, or I don't know what part we are of the play at this point, where the Argives are given room to mourn. So there are very extensive laments of the mothers. We heard a little bit of it as the bodies are coming up. And imagine this staged, and imagine real life analogs of this. My father happened to be a veteran of the Korean War. He came back alive. Only 1,000 Greeks a regiment had gone. But there was a retrospective, and I'll never forget, in one of the Greek dailies, there was a picture of the bodies that had come back through the Indian Ocean to the port of Piraeus, and they were laid out there, the biers, the mothers in black, and the king of Greece, there to receive them. So I kind of had a flashback, and how powerful that is on stage. So the mothers get to lament. The sons of the Argives, so their grandsons are with them, and then you get this intensely private and offbeat, transgressive scene with Evadne. So Evadne, you want to say anything, pipe in at this point, or I'm sorry, I'm supposed to talk about Athena. And then, it's so startling that I forgot. I got carried away again. I was brilliant the way you fell forward onto the pyre. But at the end, Athenian politics returns. So yes, Athens accepts everyone. And in the funeral orations, the help that Athens lent the seven and the children of Heracles become part of the codified virtues of the ancestors that each orator would talk about. But here, it's more that I think drama explores, but also imitates history and life. And Theseus is ready to, give the bodies back, and that's it. And this is kind of the favor that he granted. But Athena shows up and she says, kind of not so fast, it seems like. Okay. And what she wants is a little bit of a quid pro quo. So I would argue that, and what she gets is to turn these Argives into allies of Athens. Argos was a chief ally of Athens already from 462, 461, but there was a renewal of the Argive alliance around, I think in 420 and then in 416. So even though the play may be premature, I'm not so interested in that, whether it's immediately evoking that alliance. But what is interesting is that she says, no, we're going to get something in return. But by the same token, Theseus gets to gift the bodies, dorumetha, he really gifts them to Argos, so he keeps his word. So, but there is a reciprocity. So I read these plays, that's my reading in general, as representing the tension between Athens and her subjects and her subject allies in a very positive way, only that the tension between the benefits that Athens reaped from being the leader of an empire and of leading and having as subjects all these cities may be presented in a positive way, but they're only presented in tragedy, where you see that in all the Suppliant plays, Athens gets a huge benefit in return. And in this case, that thing with the tripod, I think most people don't know that, it's inscribed, the oath is inscribed on it, because Athens around that time asked, and Delphi helped in that regard, that the cities for whom Athens performed the festival of the pre-plowing season give a tithe of their first fruits to Athens. So there's that hence the connection with Delphi. But it's it's the empire comes out at the end. Athens has to get something in return.
And a lot of what's amazing about this play is how it wraps together mythical traditions, history, and sort of Athenian outlook, right? So to just remind people, we're in the middle of the first part, near the end of the first part of the Peloponnesian War here between Athens and Sparta, and Argos and Sparta are long-term enemies. Right. So in asserting an affiliation with Argos, Athens is sort of doubling down. But they're also telling a story that we see reflected in history, which is that both Athens and Sparta were out there claiming that their actions were on their allies' behalf. Right, that they were fighting for other people, not for themselves. And then we get this fabulous sort of intertextuality between Euripides and Aeschylus in that the eulogy or the funeral oration that Adrastus gives is really a bookend to the discussion of where the seven are stationed on the walls in Aeschylus' Seven Against Thebes. Before we move to talking to each actor individually, though, we had one question from YouTube, which is about that striking, violent death at the end of the play. So Evadne's death that we just talked about from Noree, is it exceptional in the tragic tradition? And what is it doing in the play? And then maybe we could transition to talking to Noree about it.
So I'm supposed to answer?
Yeah, you start.
Yes, it is. It is striking and it is unique. There are not other characters that jump off the roof of the stage building to commit suicide. And women don't commit suicide. Women do commit suicide. First and foremost, Jocasta, right? But Eurydice in Antigone and so on and so forth, but not like that. And the idea, so the only other person who seems to get almost kind of maddened and inspired and kind of perverts an element of normal wedding, because Evadne is Capaneus's wife, but she, dresses all up the way she's beautifully dressed here in her wedding attire and goes to meet her husband in death. And here the inversions are double, because for the Greeks, any girl who died before getting married was considered a bride of Hades. Antigone is the quintessential bride of Hades. But most importantly, Persephone is. And the play is taking place at Eleusis in front of the temple of Demeter, and the women are seated before the altars of Demeter and Persephone, who were worshipped together. And so this is the mother-daughter pair that got separated because of Persephone's abduction and rape by Hades. Here it's the inversion. That Evadne actually makes her wedding, her second wedding, the rejoining of her husband, a funeral, or, it's the opposite route. She's not coming back, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. But last but not least, but she glorifies it. She says that she's, going to get, she's going to get a reputation and a victory ode. This is a great victory for her. So, but it is interesting that even though it is very transgressive, that Euripides does allow us to see how this wife, she's the only wife. Everybody else the others are mothers, but they are both kind of, in a sense, united in having lost their loved ones and are longing to be reunited, and it's impossible to be reunited.
So Noree, this is another performance where you get to sort of come in and steal the show. What was in your mind for this character when you started reading through the lines?
Reading through it, the question of what is self-agency and what does joy look like when your world is turned upside down by those in power and when you have no control of the circumstances around you. And I feel it's really, really relevant in the turbulent times that we find ourselves in and out of. What do we do to regain control of our lives, of our happiness, of our fates, when no one will give it to you? And she finds this maniacal joy that I love inside of Evadne, and decides to stick it to everyone who said whether she can or can't bury her husband, whether he can join the others, can be burned or not be burned. And she takes it upon herself to join him, whether her father agrees with it, the gods, Theseus, it's all in her hands. And I think I love that power, even though it's dark and it's tragic, it's sad, but she did what she wanted to do ultimately.
Thank you. I really like the way you emphasize sort of regaining of agency at the last moment, because, you know, there's so much sorrow at the end of the play. And you are giving it a different view, right? You can say, look, Evadne wins, right?
Yes.
A world in which everyone's losing. And I think part of the difficulty of this play is looking at the balance sheet and seeing what we all lose in the process. Evie, and I think we'll bring in Paul too. Your debate, tyranny versus democracy. It's a powerful, timely conversation. What were going through your heads as you practice it and as you performed it today? So maybe Evie first, because you got to be Theseus.
I think there was something interesting about having a debate. It seems very clear that not only are they debating the principles of how a state is run or exists, but it was also very personal. It feels like a lot of our debate today, it wasn't just the kind of issue at hand, it was also just a personal dislike, I think, of each other, which also feels pretty timely. Yeah.
I mean, and I think what you bring to it is what, I think we're trained to resist as classicists, which is the anachronizing moment, right? Feeling so strongly that these words are ours. And one of the things I've learned through this process is to forget that and to feel the words. So I think that's why, Paul, for you, like taking on the Herald there, you were convincing in a frightening way with your lines. So how do you see the Herald? What kind of a person does the Herald represent?
Well, the Herald is obviously very good looking, got great breath sense. That's what I was going for a lot with the Herald. I think actually something that what Evie just said then, I think really, really stood out for me is how quickly it gets personal and how that's something that you can play as an actor as well, right? You can't sort of play sort of ideology or anything like that. Actually, you have to kind of play, what's my relationship with this person that I'm talking to? And they so instantly fall out with each other because of that choice of words, who's the master around here?
But in your speech, Paul, you sort of oozed jerkiness from the beginning, right? But then you go through your words though, come around to being almost persuasive and convincing. Like you're not just a blowhard, right? So how do you see that happening in the play? Like what do you think the Herald's sort of core contribution to the play is?
Well, I think the core contribution there is really that if someone's got an argument that we might disagree with, they can still make it brilliantly, right? And actually, when it's then put so persuasively and potentially kind of sort of quite enjoyably, then that we can kind of catch ourselves in moments going, actually, this maybe he's onto something. And I think that those moments of us questioning ourselves are what then become really interesting within that. And I think that it's something that this play has a lot of, is that, and it's been mentioned a lot, are these sort of big sort of tonal shifts that happen. Yeah. And actually that, to have a whole play that is just mourning, that's pretty hard to kind of sustain over a whole play. You need to have then these moments where the rhythm changes, but also that tone completely shifts. And there is potentially kind of quite a lot of humor. And then all of a sudden, what is sort of like a huge kind of conversation about, burial and sort of the bonds between a parent and their child and the roles of the state, actually then come down to two people's egos sort of butting up against each other for a little while.
And I mean, and that goes back to the center of the Herald speech is that statement about what the wise person does, favoring family stability over all else, right? And getting back to something that we're all living now is that conflict between our ideology and belief in the lives that we live every day. And that's part of, I think, what's powerful about the tone that this play moves through. And one of the characters who's really interesting to think about is David, your Adrastus, right? This is a broken and lost man, right? I mean, this show's not going to get better for him, right? His best case scenario is he buries everyone, and then he's done. So how did you approach this sort of, defeated king?
There was a lovely note from Paul that I was talking about earlier to kind of remember that there's a joy going through that kind of somber sorrow. He achieves his end in the end, gets the bodies. So that's an interesting contrast to play. It reminds me a lot of, it's the world of Julius Caesar, isn't it? With the kind of personal battles and kind of post-death speeches. It felt very familiar to that world to me.
Yeah.
Doing it.
I mean, there's something that's deeply elegiac about that part of the play, and I mean that in sort of the funereal sense, right? And that's that we have to remember that the losers live on in many cases, right? They still have lives and have to make sense of them. Yeah. So Carlos, moving to you, your character is almost, I think, in fact, more befuddling than Noree's character, right? Because Iphis comes in, it's just like there with like words, right? That are critical for developing Noree's character, but it seems so disjunctive. How did you make sense of Iphis's participation in the play?
I think it's like when you are in a situation with someone, and if you make an approach that is violent or aggressive, it's going to cause something different. So maybe some of the words will be like, no, don't do it, please, because I love you, and something like that. But everything here in this place are very intelligent people. So they need to find the correct words to get what they want. And in my way of thinking, I was trying to appeal to my daughter, with something like trying to come like a very, how can I say this expression in English, because I don't have a translation in Spanish. Yeah, you are trying to appeal to something inside her. Yeah, just to stop.
I like the way you put it. You try the characters in this play are all trying to find the right words, right? Which is maybe a way to sort of describe drama altogether, right? Always searching for the perfect words, which might unpack or unlock things, and we never quite get there. So
yeah, and that's a comment. That's an issue when they try to do modern versions of this play, that they cut completely the language and they try to do something more modern, and well, almost everything goes away if you do that.
It's true. So speaking of unlocking, Sara, you open the play and then you close it, right? Then you start with like this moment of deep weakness and sorrow, and end with this like damning guiding strength. How did you see bringing together both of those forces into one actor? How do you even do that?
First, technically the language and looking at what the language can do. And then, Athena is a god. So I wore my goddess earrings today with the little owl so that I could, of course, channel Athena through my earrings. No, but Paul talked about when we were rehearsing the idea, of the mother praying, the very earthly mother appealing to the god, and then the god showing up at the end. For me, it was sort of just finding the emotional quality of the mother first, and then just trying to go over extreme with sort of epic quality godlikeness at the end.
I like this way that you call it epic, because Athena ends the Odyssey as well, and there's no stronger end than Athena saying you're done, right? But it communicates this sort of Athenian strength and mission. But I wonder, how that's balanced by this sense of mourning, right? I mean, Euripides always gives us, let's say, ambiguities to navigate. And this play, so Emma, I know you're always involved in selecting some of the scenes. This isn't a play I know nearly as well as Angeliki does. What were some of the challenges you faced in cutting it down to the performance we saw today?
This, I mean, and as has been said, this is a long play. And there were a lot of options, and the kind of the thing driving the decision making was really to give as many different characters a chance to kind of speak their viewpoints, because I believe I put this in the dramaturgy notes. This play can sometimes come off as a very heated policy debate, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like there's some very trenchant political commentary happening here, and I wanted to give an opportunity and give a platform for as much of that commentary to remain in the play as possible, but also to kind of provide these moments of extreme emotion. Like I wasn't going to lose Evadne and Iphis just because it's such a striking moment. It always makes me think of like Denethor in Lord of the Rings, like plunging off the cliff of Minas Tirith, like that kind of burning star. So yeah, keeping that contrast between like these extreme heightened emotion and trenchant policy commentary.
Well, I think you did that because we hit all of those things. I can't imagine actually being in an audience and having all this happen to me. But that's pretty much the way I feel about almost all of Euripides' plays, right? Is they take us through these highs and lows. Before we turn to a different subject, Angeliki, I know you've been watching these plays. As someone who studies ancient tragedy and has been an expert in it for a while, how has seeing the performances on Zoom changed or impacted the way you think about it?
A lot, actually. I'm trying to think of specific examples, but I will start first by saying that, and I wanted to say it about this performance, I really mean it. I think your actors and your directorship is just unparalleled. I mean, you're just wonderful, wonderful acting. And what I have noticed more and more that you do and you bring out is by watching the performance and listening to the commentary, especially of your commentary and the actors, that I see the new possibilities, and there's so many. So, I mean, just what Evadne just said, sorry that I keep calling you Evadne. So what Evadne just said, the idea of kind of the only way that agency is realized in this way. And I mean, that's a very dark reading of patriarchal society as well. But on the other hand, the way you brought it to the moment was amazing. Then seeing Adrastus, I just loved your performance, sir. It was just amazing. And carrying the weight of the war, but the weight of having all these unburied people and the weight and the trauma of the mothers all at once, you brought that out so well. So I thought that was really amazing. And I thought that Theseus and the Herald, just to say in this one, for example, they brought out so much more. This is the best reading that I've seen of that scene. I've never sided with the Herald more than today. And I'm an Athenian by birth. Yay. So, but I also like the way Theseus carried through his character, that, you know, he at the beginning, this is what he believed. Then he seemed really like the leader that he came into being, that he was coming into being, listening to his mother, and you were really taking in, but showed a lot of strength as you were listening to the Theban Herald. In the way you came back, one could feel your strength needing to push that argument that is different, because the Herald was making some good points about Athenian mob rule and the like.
Yeah, it was, and every week, you know, the actors' interpretations and how much they give of themselves in this time, it's a gift to us.
So I think the fact that there's selection of scenes, I think the particular acting, the way that we all pay attention, but also I think that the themes that come out in terms of reception is way closer to contemporary politics and to political theater as it should be than I've seen in the past. So that helps me a lot, and we'll watch it in class too.
Thank you. So just for some one reminder for those of you who haven't heard it before, we are doing a competition called Playing Medea, and you can check on the Out of Chaos Theater website for the details. We're asking students at university and college level to send us performances of scenes by video, and we really want to expand our circle and our community of people engaging in this work at this time. And so we have somebody today to speak with us. Laura, I'm sorry, I don't want to say your last name wrong. I didn't get a chance to ask you. Would you introduce yourself and tell everybody about the project you're engaged in?
Thank you. Hello, my name's Laura Deloche, and I'm a member of the Department of Modern and Classical Languages at the University of Wyoming. And tomorrow, if you would like to hear a reading of the entire play, Relative Theatrics, which is a company based in Laramie, Wyoming, bringing risky, relevant, real theater to Southeast Wyoming, and now through Zoom to anyone, is going to be offering a reading of Euripides Suppliants, the entire play. It'll be beginning at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, so that'll be 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 Central, 9 Eastern, and I'm afraid really late in the UK, so for joining in. But you're welcome to join us. You can go to relativetheatrics.com, where you will find a link to register for the Zoom meeting where we'll be having our performance. And then there'll be a discussion after the performance with the community that I'll be moderating.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Laura. And hopefully we can get those links on the YouTube page and CHS so people can see and have another experience to contemplate this play. As usual, I want to thank everyone involved in this project. You don't get to see us all behind the scenes, but it's given us a pretty large community each week to sort of act as an anchor in this strangest of all years of my life. Paul, artistic director, brought us all together, Liz Fisher, Amy, Emma, Lana, who's getting a blissful week off from the internet, Ali, who's keeping things going today, John, who makes our posters, the production crew of Keith, Ellen, Janet, and everyone else. Next week, we're going to be getting together with Euripides still and another painful play, Phoenician Women. So again, exiles, thieves. So I invite you to come back next week, Wednesday at 3 p.m. Until then, stay safe, and we hope to see you soon.